Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex. And today I want to talk about the ABX rat race and why we have so many new overpowered characters update after update. Why so many native tier 2s? Why so many pseudo native tier 2s? Before I get into that, I want to apologize for this video being late. I was out getting some new glasses that you'll be able to enjoy on some of my videos and my live streams. So I had some IRL kind of setbacks, but I do have an important discussion that I want to have with you guys today about the kind of progression of the game and how we've seen more and more characters, but not necessarily much effort put in towards existing characters or in towards the game modes for those characters. And I want to use a game mode that I often talk about and I often cite as one of the premier places for competitiveness, but also one of the more flawed, kind of imbalanced places in the game, and that's Alliance Battle and by extension Extreme Alliance Battle. I know a lot of you guys don't find this game mode entertaining and you don't find videos about, you know, ABX guides for scores and high scores very helpful, but it's something you should stick around for, because I'm not discussing that per se. I'm rather using this as a vehicle to point out that Netmarble has really not done much in the way of game design, and they've really only been pushing the character design basically to its limits and beyond. And essentially we can track this back to the X-Men update. The X-Men update was really when we started to see major power creep with heroes being introduced. If you're not familiar with what power creep means, it is when new content is added to a game that is just blatantly more powerful in every respect than all of the other previous content. And what it basically does is it makes things obsolete. So the way you can think about it is you can think of a car that has, you know, no rear view or side mirrors and has, you know, very thin wheels that are very easily you know, imbalanced or toppled. And you compare that to a modern day car with, you know, multiple cameras mounted to it, with you know, rear view mirrors and side mirrors and, you know, extra tread tires, and that is just far and away a better car. And so that if those two cars were racing and if those two cars were introduced into the same race, there would be clear power creep and a distinct advantage to that second car. Well, a character like Jean Grey was our kind of first real taste of, or the biggest, most obvious taste for something like power creep. And there may have been instances of power creep before Jean Grey. You could go back to someone like Doctor Strange, Dormammu. You can even go back as far as Sharon Rogers. But I think Jean Grey illustrates the power creep that I want to discuss today in the clearest possible way, because not only was Jean Grey, or is Jean Grey, an extremely powerful character. You know, her skills do a lot of damage. That's a very easy way of measuring a character's strength. How much damage do they do? But in addition to that, Jean Grey combines essentially all of the powerful game or character skill mechanics that we've come to know, on top of introducing new mechanics. And that's where she really broke the mold and divided herself and separated herself even from the likes of Wolverine. If you have to remember this, Wolverine and Jean Grey were introduced in the same update. And while Wolverine has insane healing, he's nowhere near as powerful as Jean Grey. He doesn't have the iframes. He doesn't have the true damage accumulation or the guard hit or the, you know, activated super defense and all defense. She doesn't have the freeze or time freeze effect of the Phoenix Embrace. He doesn't have, sorry, the massive spike damage of Phoenix Descent, in addition to the CC effect, and he definitely doesn't have Phoenix Awaken, which was the first time that we had seen a character with this kind of penetration on super armor, barrier, shield, immune, invincible. Basically, you were never safe when Jean Grey was around, and it's introducing these new mechanics attached to a character that is already grossly overpowered compared to their other counterparts. That was really the purest form of power creep that I've ever seen in this game. And so that's what I want you to take away from the character and take away from what this means symbolically for the rest of this discussion. Think about if Jean Grey was the same character that she is now, all of her skills were the same, except she didn't penetrate at all. so she never got that buff on Phoenix Awaken. Would Jean Grey be a bad character in this game? No. Would Jean Grey still be a top 10 character in this game? Probably. If we skip some of the latest updates, she probably would be top 10, possibly top 5. So you can see that there's just such a wide gap between the top level characters and just everyone else that it's just insane. You know, characters like Jean Grey, characters like Quicksilver, and now Ant-Man and Nova, these characters are like triple S tier. They're not even S tier. There's no S tier anymore. They're triple S tier. These are characters who have game-defining, meta-defining abilities and skills on multiple different skills. You know, Nova has multiple ignore targeting skills, which makes him a nightmare for any kind of auto game mode because he can automatically target you no matter what you're doing. He's got extreme burst damage with his 3rd skill and his 5th skill, 5 seconds of invincibility. He has a channeling skill. He's got everything except healing and resurrection. But all of the things that he has combine to make him one of the most formidable characters, especially for auto game modes where you can't control what the character is doing and where normally your character would stand still. And this is something that I think we're going to start to see a lot more of, because this is one of the untapped potentials of the game that Netmarble hasn't yet exploited. And that is when a character stops moving because the enemy character is iframing. So if you just put your timeline characters on autoplay, or if you play enough Conquest, you will notice that when the enemy iframes, for example Thanos' 5th skill, your character will just stand there. They won't run away, they won't run in circles, they'll just stand there waiting to be punished by the iframe. But what happens when a character like Cyclops is awake and kind of active and not stunned for one of those iframes is he can still attack with his 3rd skill because it has the ignore targeting effect. Well, Nova has that on multiple skills, and I think we're going to start to see more of that because those types of characters and those types of skills really punish those iframe heavy characters. And while you can see this as counterplay, it's not really counterplay. It's essentially just introducing new, more powerful versions of existing heroes, of existing effects, to make these new characters more appetizing to the community. You know, ask yourself, do people really want Ant-Man, little metal-headed Mickey Mouse? Did people really want Sam Alexander, or for that matter, Blue Marvel? I'm not trying to say that these characters are bad. I'm not trying to say that they don't have fans in the game, but did you want Blue Marvel to be as tanky and as hard-hitting as he is? Or would you have rather seen a lot of these same effects spread out among, you know, beloved characters that have been around since the game's inception, like Ultron and Vision? You know, why did we get Blue Marvel instead of getting a new uniform for Ultron? And so that is kind of the second part of this discussion, is why there is such a disdain, why Netmarble seems to have such a gross disgust for buffing or at least updating old characters, and yet they keep giving us new characters to break the mold, specifically for Extreme Alliance Battle. You know, that is the game mode that changes the most often, because the game mode itself doesn't change, the characters in it do. And that's why I told you at the beginning of the video to remember Extreme Alliance Battle, because that is the easiest way to track the power creep in this game. How many times per update does a character get replaced for Extreme Alliance Battle? Well, Ant-Man replaced Thanos, Nova replaced Odin. Right there, you already have 2. Usually we don't get more than 1 per update, so 2 or more is just borderline insanity as far as the competitive community goes. And while it doesn't really make a difference for people who play casually or people who play for fun, it does when you get into the power gap, and essentially why Netmarble spends so much time building these new characters rather than buffing old characters. And it doesn't really bode well for you if you're the type of person who's really hoping for an Amadeus Cho rework to make him a better character. If you're really hoping that they're going to take a look at Miles Morales and fix some of his problems. You know, there are plenty more characters in this game that need to be fixed than there are new characters to introduce. And that's saying, that's knowing that there are, hundreds of characters they could introduce. But really, all of the characters they're going to introduce from this point on are either going to be one of two types of characters. They're going to be characters that are not strong enough to have a long-lasting, defining role in the game, and they're going to just descend into mediocrity, like Black Dwarf. He's not a bad character, but he's not going to be at the top of anyone's list. Even a Black Dwarf fan will find a better, more suitable version of Black Dwarf to play as, whether it's Ant-Man or Hulk with his uniform or someone else. These characters who are just there, they just exist. Or they're going to be meta-defining or shifting characters like we're seeing now with Ant-Man and with Nova. What happens when Nova gets a uniform? And I ask you this, I'm asking these questions, I'm posing these questions, of course, because this update 3.6 has forced us to take a much harder, serious look at the game and why Netmarble does the things that they do the things that they do for the game design and character design, because there's very little design being put into characters aside from making them bigger, stronger, and faster. There's not a lot of new kinds of skills being introduced outside of the ignore targeting effect, which we've already seen for Cyclops. There's not a lot of new animations or kind of clever ways of designing characters with different effects. A lot of recycled stuff about damage reduction, iframes, reflect, pierce, etc. We're probably going to see pierce immunity eventually, but why is none of this effort, why is none of this time being put into balancing and buffing existing characters? I know that uniforms don't sell as well as loot boxes, they don't sell as well as upgrade packs if you need materials for native tier 2 characters like the tier 2 like the 2-year anniversary pack that you can buy to get Black Antimatter and Chaos Norn Stones for people like Quicksilver and Wanda. I understand that uniforms don't sell that well, but that's basically the only thing I have to say about that. Why don't we have buffs to existing characters instead of having these new overpowered characters? Because they don't sell as well in the marketplace of Marvel Future Fight. If someone can come up with a better answer for me, leave it below in the comments. But otherwise, that's really the only reason I can think of why Netmarble decided that they should introduce Ant-Man as the new universal villain to dominate the game instead of buffing Ultron and making him as good as Thanos for Extreme Alliance Battle, or even slightly better. I don't think the community really gives a shit, excuse my language, whether we're using Ultron for this game mode or we're using Ant-Man. The only difference I see is that Netmarble gets to introduce a shiny new toy to sell, okay, and justify some new ridiculous price for why you should get that hero, i.e. new Ultimate Chest loot box BS gambling casino bonanza, instead of in a less sexy way, but in a much more practical way, and in a way that rewards and thanks the community for investing in these characters in the first place. They introduce even a super premium 2000 crystal uniform for a character like Ultron, who is much more popular in the comics, much more popular among the community of Marvel Future Fight, and in dire need of an update and an upgrade. You could have given Ultron some of Ant-Man's skills. You could have given Vision some of Nova's skills. No one would have cared, really. People probably would have been happier overall. But aside from the bottom line being money, I really can't see why we're getting all these new characters who are just blatant, overpowered copy versions of existing characters, when what we really want and what would make more sense is to have less emphasis on sales and new characters, more emphasis on character rebalancing, even if that means it's only for uniforms, and then hopefully some game mode development kind of sprinkled in there amongst everything else. But let me know what you guys think of this why so many native tier 2s question and the arguments that followed. If you have a better reason why Netmarble decides to introduce new, more powerful versions of the same typings instead of buffing existing characters that fit that same type, i.e. Ant-Man versus Ultron, let me know in the comments below. If you have anything else to add to this discussion, or if you like my glasses, let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you enjoy the content, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.